I'm back with part 2 of the story of the Association. Last we left off, we talked about the band's beginnings and their first 2 albums, and along comes the Association and Renaissance. And at the end of this recording, they were at a crossroads because they did not have any hits of significance, and they were taken over by Warner Brothers, who bought out Valiant Records. Warner Brothers liked the Association and said, well, we're going to continue this, but we're going to bring in our own producer, because Jerry Yester was a little bit green. He maybe wasn't the right guy at the time. Although it's a great sounding record, it didn't yield the hits. And you got to have hits. So the Association started working on this record, and Yester was still involved in some of the demoing of the songs on this record, but they brought in producer Bones Howe. Bones Howe had he's done a little more work with some jazz guys, and he was an up-and-coming guy as well, like Kurt Becher had been. Now for this record, what the new production of Bones Howe meant was that they're going to use session players on it. There was another big change in the band, because Jules Alexander left the band. He was probably the most proficient guy in the studio anyway. So he left, and he just couldn't take the rigors of the road anymore, and he was tired of life on the road. And Larry Ramos was brought in. He was formerly of the New Christy Minstrels. Ramos was also a great lead vocalist, and you can hear him on the lead vocal of their latest single, the next single, which was called Windy. Now Windy was written by a friend of theirs named Ruth Ann Friedman, and she had been living with them for a while, and she was a folkie, and she was brought in by, I think, Jimmy Yester's wife. And the song that she wrote, it was more of a hippie type of song, but when they recorded it, it was very poppy. And one of the directions the band took at this time that comes along with heavier production and slicker production, it just is more commercial and less hippie-like. It's a little bit, in other words, it was becoming a little bit less like the Association. However, Windy went to #1 and was a big hit of the summer. So following that hit up, they had done a song or two by the Idrisi brothers, and the song Never My Love was brought to them by the Idrisi brothers. Now these guys were songwriters. They had been trying to break into certain groups. They had tried out for the Mickey Mouse Club in the 50s, and they were just guys on the scene. So Never My Love was a song that they realized, hey, this is going to be a big hit for us, and that was the next single off of this album. You ask me if there'll come a time. Now, like all of their albums, this is Inside Out, that's the name of it, and they are very diplomatic about how they handle who sings lead vocals and what songs get written and who gets to bring in songs. It was very even. And on this album, we have some great songs here delivered by Jim Yester, for instance, like On a Quiet Night. On a quiet night, distant voices carry soft. Though they go psychedelic on one of these songs called Wantin' Ain't Gettin', they typically stick to the pop sounds that they got from Windy and Never My Love. Sometimes talking's not enough, girl. Sweet love comes to me. Closing out this album is a song called Requiem for the Masses, one of their best songs. It's a wonderful blend of their vocal harmonies, and it's an anti-war type of a song. And this is the type of song that they would do, they could do live as well. And this is more indicative of who they were. Now also during this time they played the Monterey Pop Festival, the first really big pop festival to get national coverage, I guess. And unfortunately they did not wind up in the film. And Kirkman always felt bad about that. One of the problems with the Association at this time, they were still wearing their suits. You know, in 1967, the fancy suits for television kind of started going away. And the association was viewed as more of an establishment band, I guess. They were playing songs like Never My Love, Cherish, Windy. They were more for pop audiences, and they weren't really seen by the overall public as being like an underground style band, which in their hearts they were more so, but on stage and on the records they were not. One of the things that benefited them by being located in Los Angeles, they were very involved in a lot of television shows. They almost were the house band on the Smothers Brothers show and appeared there many times. And they were doing like 250 shows a year. This was not uncommon for bands. And the reason oftentimes studio musicians were brought in, bands would make their money on the road. Now the association could have played instruments on their records. It would have taken way longer. And the record companies knew this, so let's let our guys do this. This allowed the band to go out on the road, make the amount of money they could make, or a bigger amount of money. The problem with that is that they would only have maybe 40 days, as Kirkman says, to record an album, which just wasn't long enough. And these guys started to feel the pressures of the industry. Nonetheless, the hits they had on this record, Never My Love went to number 3, Windy was number 1. The B-side of Never My Love was Requiem for the Masses. That did chart as well. And they had hits, so they said, well, we're going to stick with this formula. So Bones Howe produced their next album. This is early '68. This is called Birthday. And you can see the psychedelic cover, very much in with the times. The lead-off single from this record is probably the best indication of who they were as a band, and that's called Everything That Touches You.
In my most secure moments, I still can't believe I'm spending those moments with you.
This whole record, I would say, is even more polished than Inside Out. Bones Howe really took it to another level, I think, and I think that level it just sounds too polished and too slick. Bones Howe went on to produce The Fifth Dimension. He was perfect for them because they weren't a band, they were merely a vocal group. But these guys, I think, struggled a little bit with some of the session playing. However, they had a great list of songs here. So the other song on here that was a hit was Time for Living, which was another very pop song, summer of '68, and this made them look very AM radio and commercial. Other songs on here I think made them look a little more underground, like
Sunrise, sunset, what you're born with is what you get.
A couple other of the standout tracks are one from Larry Ramos, his very jazzy Like Always, and two from Jim Yester, the psychedelic Barefoot Gentleman and the title track Birthday Morning.
Be the barefoot boy in the earth green waving fields, leaves for the city. While I'm walking all alone, like always.
This morning, a birthday morning, God bless the morning.
The most famous song that the group never recorded, happened to be for this album, was MacArthur Park, written by Jimmy Webb. Richard Harris had a big hit with it that year, and Webb had written the song, I think, with the association in mind and presented to them first. And it was presented during these sessions at the end of a long day, and I don't think the association was in the mood to hear that long of a song, and they passed on it. And I think Webb was really disappointed because I think he really liked the idea of having 6 voices to work with on a long song like that. And apparently they politely declined, and it had to do more with, not for disliking the song so much, I think, but if they had a long song like that, 7-8 minute song, a couple of their own songs would have to go from this album. And they were loath to do that. Now, the song MacArthur Park not only was a big hit for Richard Harris, but it was a big hit for Waylon Jennings in '69, and also a #1 hit song for Donna Summer in 1978. So by the middle of '68, you had the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. You know, things were getting darker, things were changing. The association, I think, sensed this, and the next single they did was a single called Six Man Band. And this was a harder rock song, probably the hardest song they ever cut. And this one, by the time they did this record, There was other bands that were doing this kind of thing that were really serious hard rock bands, like the Doors or Jefferson Airplane, Hendrix, you name it. And although this song charted at number 47, I guess I wouldn't call it one of their biggest hits.
I'm a seeker and a knower in a six-man mind.
So that song and their best songs up until this point showed up on the Association's Greatest Hits. This was released in late '68, and this is their biggest selling album of all time. It's still probably selling today. And one of the things I've always felt about bands that had a Greatest Hits album in the '60s was typically that this ended their chart success. I always felt that Greatest Hits albums conditioned the public to wait for the next Greatest Hits package and maybe not buy the next album. If it didn't have a hit on it, a strong hit, you were in trouble. So this album, it kind of caps a part of their career. They really stopped having hits after this point with some minor exceptions. And like I was saying, the music industry was changing. The listening audience was changing, and bands like the Association were started to be seen as more square than hip, quite frankly. So this great album is one that never seems to get old. Great selections of songs. They missed a couple good ones on here, but generally speaking, it's a fine compilation. And this ended 1968 for them. So we'd have some more changes in 1969, and we're going to explore those on my next Association video here on Pop Goes the 60s.